The sun beat down mercilessly on the Cedar Springs Agricultural Fair in Montana. Men in wide-brimmed hats and women in spotless boots circulated among the pavilions, while the smell of packed dirt mingled with the aroma of fresh hay and strong coffee. It was the season for business, for handshakes that sealed fortunes and dreams. Sarah Mitchell observed everything from a distance, seated on an improvised stool near the food stand. At 28, her face carried the distinctive features of someone who lived on the land, skin golden from the sun, brown eyes as alert as those of a wild animal, and a posture that combined humility and strength. Her simple clothes contrasted with the expensive outfits of the wealthy ranchers. "Today's the day," she murmured to herself, clutching in her right hand a worn envelope containing all her savings. On the other side of the main pavilion, an unusual commotion caught her attention. Experienced handlers were struggling to control a black buffalo of impressive size. The animal snorted and stamped its hooves so forcefully on the ground that it raised clouds of red dust. "There he goes again," commented an elderly man beside her. "Third fair they've tried to sell that beast. Nobody wants trouble at home." Sarah rose slowly, as if drawn by an invisible force. She approached the auction area where chairs arranged in a semicircle were beginning to be occupied by potential buyers. The environment was air-conditioned, but sweat trickled down the foreheads of many present, not from the heat, but from the tension of negotiations. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer's voice echoed through the speakers, "we now begin." The special lot, a male buffalo 4 years old, superior lineage, starting bid 50% below market value. A murmur ran through the audience. Everyone knew the story of that animal. Rumors about its aggressiveness and untamability circulated. Among breeders like Legend, the buffalo was brought to the center, imposing and defiant, as if challenging each person present. "Nobody will want that 4-legged demon," whispered a middle-aged man to his companion. "They say he's already injured 3 handlers." The auctioneer, sensing the general hesitation, tried to excite the crowd. "It's a unique opportunity, gentlemen. A specimen of exceptional stature. Who'll place the first bid?" Silence. Only the sound of the animal's snorts filled the room. "Come on, folks. We're practically giving this animal away." More silence. The auctioneer, visibly embarrassed, was preparing to close the auction without a sale when a firm female voice cut through the air. "I'll place the initial bid." All heads turned toward the voice. Sarah remained standing, oblivious to the looks of astonishment and disdain. The auctioneer, recovering from his surprise, questioned, "Are you sure, ma'am, this animal has a history?" "I have the money right here," she replied, raising the envelope, "and I know exactly what I'm buying." A muffled laugh rippled through the room. Some ranchers exchanged mocking glances. The auction director approached the auctioneer and whispered something in his ear. "Well, ma'am, Sarah Mitchell," she completed. "Ms. Mitchell, you might want to reconsider. This animal has been returned by 3 different owners. It's not suitable for a woman alone? For someone without an important last name?" interrupted Sarah, with a serene smile on her lips. "Do you accept my bid or not?" The discomfort was palpable. The auction director made a gesture of reluctant approval, and the auctioneer brought down his gavel without waiting for other bids, which wouldn't have come anyway. "Sold to Ms. Sarah Mitchell." While signing the purchase papers, Sarah felt several gazes upon her. Discreetly, she observed the buffalo being prepared for transport. There was something in those wild black eyes that no one else seemed to notice. It wasn't just fury, it was fear. "Got a name for him?" asked the employee, filling out the documentation. "Titan," Sarah replied without hesitation. "His name is Titan." As she left the pavilion, she was approached by a man with a rustic appearance and calloused hands who introduced himself as Hank, an old friend of her grandfather. "Girl, you just threw your money away," he said, shaking his head. "That beast isn't even good for jerky." "My grandfather used to say, 'There are no bad animals, Mr. Hank. There are only people who don't know how to understand them.'" The old ranch hand sighed, looking at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Your granddad August was always a dreamer, and I see you take after him." Hank paused and then added, "Need help transporting that beast. Thanks, but I've already arranged everything. The truck will be here in an hour. Sarah walked away slowly, feeling the weight of her decision. She wasn't just buying an animal. She was taking a chance to prove something to herself and to all those who doubted her. In her pocket, besides the purchase receipt, she kept a faded photograph of Grandpa August, the only one who always believed she had a special gift for handling animals. "Let's see who you really are, Titan," she murmured, observing, from a distance, the buffalo that now belonged to her. The Mitchell family's small property was 30 miles from Cedar Springs, hidden among gentle hills and surrounded by vegetation that bravely resisted the drought. The main house, with adobe walls and clay tiles, preserved the memories of 3 generations. Around it, some corrals, a modest barn, and a grazing area completed the scene. The transport truck stopped in front of the main gate when the sun was already setting on the horizon. The driver, a middle-aged man with a tired appearance, got down and addressed Sarah with an apprehensive expression. "Miss, that animal caused trouble the whole trip. I don't know how we're going to get him out of there." Sarah observed the inside of the truck. Titan remained motionless at the back, his eyes glowing like 2 embers in the twilight. His breathing was heavy and irregular. "Open the ramp and let me handle this," she said with a calmness that didn't reflect her internal nervousness. "Are you sure? This beast is no joke." "I'm sure. Thank you for your concern." The man shrugged, but couldn't hide his relief. He opened the ramp and quickly stepped away. Sarah positioned herself a few yards away, took a deep breath, and waited. "Come on, Titan," she called in a firm voice but without aggression. "Your new home." The buffalo didn't move. He remained in the same place, like a black statue at the back of the truck. After 10 minutes of waiting, the driver began to get impatient. "Miss, I have more deliveries. Should I call someone to help push him?" "No," Sarah replied dryly. "He'll come out when he feels safe." Another 15 minutes passed. The sun had completely disappeared, and the first stars were already shining in the sky. Suddenly, without any prior signal, Titan moved. His hooves resonated against the metal of the truck as he slowly advanced to the edge of the ramp. There, he stopped again, his eyes fixed on Sarah, who held his gaze without backing down. It was like a silent duel, a first attempt to establish trust, or at least respect. "You can go," she said to the driver without taking her eyes off the animal. "Leave the ramp. Someone will return it tomorrow." The man hesitated for a moment, but the young woman's determined expression left no room for arguments. He handed over the transport documentation, got into the cab and left, leaving a cloud of red dust behind. Alone with the buffalo, Sarah remained motionless. "It's all right, big guy," she murmured. "No rush." When darkness had completely taken over, Titan finally descended the ramp with heavy steps. Upon touching the ground of the ranch, he snorted forcefully and stamped the soil as if testing its firmness. From inside the house, a gray-haired woman observed the scene through the window. Aunt Martha, Sarah's aunt, who had cared for her after her parents' deaths. When her niece finally entered, it was already past 9 at night. "Girl, have you completely lost your mind?" was her first comment. "Spent all your savings on that? Monster?" Sarah poured herself a glass of water before responding. "He's not a monster, Aunt Martha. He's just an animal that never had a real chance. And what do you plan to do with him? He's not even good for plowing. Your father must be turning in his grave seeing this absurdity." The mention of her father made Sarah grip the glass more tightly. Anthony Mitchell had been a practical and traditional man who never understood his daughter's special connection with animals. For him, animals were for work or food, nothing more. "I'm going to train him," she finally answered, "and then maybe present him at the National Exposition." Aunt Martha let out a bitter laugh. "You and your impossible dreams, just like your grandfather." "Grandpa taught me that." "Your grandfather almost lost this ranch with his crazy ideas," interrupted her aunt. "If your father hadn't taken over and put things in order, today we wouldn't even have a place to fall dead." A heavy silence settled between the two. Sarah knew there had been an old dispute between her father and grandfather about how to manage the property. August Mitchell, her grandfather, believed in a spiritual connection with the land and animals. Her father, pragmatic, saw this as nonsense from people without ambition. "I'm going to bed," said Sarah, avoiding prolonging the discussion. "I'll start early tomorrow." That night, lying in her simple bed, she heard the sounds of the ranch transform. The croaking of frogs, the distant call of an owl, the wind in the leaves of the mango trees, and among these familiar sounds, a new one, the restless snorting of Titan, who would spend his first night in a strange environment. Before dawn, Sarah was already up. She prepared a bucket with a special mixture of fresh grass, molasses, and some vegetables. Carefully, she approached the improvised corral where she had left Titan. The buffalo was alert, as if he hadn't slept at any moment. "Good morning, big guy," she said softly. "I brought your breakfast." She placed the bucket outside the fence, in a spot where the animal could reach if he wanted. Then she sat a few yards away, on the boards of an old feeding trough. "I know you don't trust me yet, but we'll change that." The sun rose completely, tinting the sky with orange hues. Titan remained motionless for almost an hour, just observing the bucket and occasionally the tranquil figure of Sarah. Finally, with cautious movements, he approached and sniffed the food. After a moment of hesitation, he began to eat. Sarah smiled discreetly. It was a small beginning, but significant. When Titan finished, she rose slowly, avoiding sudden movements. "Good boy. See you again tomorrow." As she walked back to the house, she saw a jeep approaching on the dirt road. She immediately recognized Hank's vehicle. Beside him, two other men. "Came to see if the young lady and the four-legged demon are still in one piece," he shouted, stopping the car. "Brought reinforcements in case we need to end this madness." The tone was joking, but Sarah noticed the real concern behind the words, and she also noticed something else in the eyes of the other men: curiosity. News of her unusual purchase must already be circulating in the region. The following weeks established a peculiar routine at the Mitchell Ranch. Every morning at the first ray of sunlight, Sarah visited Titan with a bucket of fresh food. At first she kept a safe distance, always respecting the animal's space. Gradually, she reduced that distance, inch by inch, day by day. "How long? Are you going to keep up this foolishness?" Aunt Martha frequently asked, watching from the porch as her niece sat for hours near the corral. "There are so many useful things to do around here." Sarah would just smile in response. She knew that every minute there was an investment, not a waste of time. The buffalo, initially skittish, began to show subtle signs of acceptance. He no longer moved away when she approached, and his eyes, once constantly alarmed, occasionally showed an almost childlike curiosity. On a particularly hot morning, while organizing tools in the shed, Sarah heard the sound of a car approaching. It was an imported model, glossy and imposing, completely out of place in that rural setting. The vehicle stopped near the house, and from it descended a tall man with an urban appearance, wearing dark glasses and expensive clothes that contrasted with the simplicity of the place. "Chris!" exclaimed Aunt Martha, rushing out of the house to receive the visitor. What a wonderful surprise! Sarah froze, feeling a knot form in her stomach. Chris Mitchell, her older brother, who had left the ranch years ago to try his luck in Seattle. The last time they had seen each other had been at their grandfather's 80th birthday 3 years earlier. The occasion had ended in a heated discussion about the future of the property. "Little sis," he greeted with a formal smile upon seeing her. "Still the same, huh? Always covered in dirt with that country girl look." "And you're still the same. Shopping mall playboy," she retorted, wiping her dirty hands on an old cloth. "What brings you back to our humble abode? Tired of the big city?" Chris laughed, but his eyes remained cold. "Came to see how things are going around here. After all, half of this ranch is mine, remember?" Aunt Martha quickly intervened. "Let's go inside, eat something. I made that cornbread you love." They walked toward the house. Chris suddenly stopped, his gaze fixing on the corral where Titan was resting in the shade. "So it's true," he commented with a tone of incredulity. The story of the problematic buffalo, News travels fast, they're even talking about it in Seattle. People have nothing better to do with their lives, Sarah replied dryly. I'd say you're the one with nothing better to do, he retorted. Spending money on an animal nobody wanted. Honestly, Sarah. During lunch, the conversation remained tense, with seemingly innocent questions from Chris about the financial situation of the ranch, interspersed with comments about the wasted potential of the property. We could sell part of the land to that agribusiness group, he suggested, helping himself to more rice. They're buying everything in the region. They'd pay good money. This land is not for sale, Sarah replied firmly. This is where Grandpa and Dad built their lives. It's our legacy. Legacy? Chris laughed with disdain. The only legacy I see is a decaying ranch, a house falling apart, and a sister who prefers to play Buffalo Whisperer rather than face reality. Before Sarah could respond, a deafening noise came from outside, a metallic sound followed by strong snorts and the noise of breaking wood. "Titan!" she exclaimed, quickly rising. When she reached the corral, she found the buffalo in a state of extreme agitation. The fence was partially destroyed, and the animal was moving in circles, snorting and stomping the ground violently. "What happened here?" asked Chris, who had followed her. Sarah examined the area and noticed a broken glass bottle near the water trough. "Someone threw this in here," she said, pointing to the shards. "Scared him. Or maybe your precious buffalo is exactly what everyone says, a dangerous and unpredictable animal." Ignoring her brother's comment, Sarah opened the side gate and entered the corral. Chris shouted, alarmed, "Have you lost your mind? You'll end up getting hurt." The young woman advanced slowly, speaking in a low and rhythmic voice. "Easy, Titan, it's all right, big guy, nobody's going to hurt you." The buffalo stopped its circular movement and fixed its eyes on her. There was something different in its gaze, a mute request for help, for understanding. Sarah continued approaching inch by inch until she was less than 6 feet from the animal. "That's it, good boy. It's me, Sarah. Everything's okay now." To the astonishment of Chris and Aunt Martha, who were watching terrified from the fence, Titan gradually calmed down. His breathing became more regular, and the aggressive posture gave way to an almost submissive attitude. "Amazing," murmured Hank, who had arrived attracted by the noise. "In 40 years of dealing with animals, I've never seen anything like." That's when she finally left the corral. Sarah found her brother with an expression that mixed surprise and irritation. "Great trick," he commented, forcing a disinterested tone. "But a circus show doesn't pay the bills." "It's not a trick, Chris, it's trust, something you'd never understand." That night, after Chris retired to the old room he still kept in the house, Sarah remained on the porch, contemplating the stars. Hank, who had stayed for a last cup of coffee, sat beside her. "You know, girl, your grandfather had that same gift. He used to say talking to animals was easy. The hard part was making them trust that you wouldn't betray them afterward." Sarah smiled, feeling a deep connection with the grandfather she had barely known. "I think I'm beginning to understand what he meant." "Your brother is planning something," commented the old ranch hand, changing the subject. "I saw him talking with those fellows from the agribusiness company in town yesterday. Doesn't surprise me. Chris always wanted to turn the ranch into quick money. Be careful, girl. He didn't come just for a family visit." Before retiring, Sarah went to check on Titan one last time. The buffalo was resting peacefully, with no signs of the previous stress. Upon noticing her presence, he raised his head. "You surprise me today, big guy," she said softly. "We're making progress, aren't we?" As if responding, Titan moved to the fence and for the first time allowed her to gently touch his muzzle. The contact lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to confirm what Sarah already suspected. She wasn't just taming a difficult animal, she was building a special connection, something few would understand. The next morning she found an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside, a glossy flyer announcing the upcoming National Exposition of Cedar Springs 3 months away. On the flyer, a handwritten note from Chris. "Still time to sell this buffalo before making a fool of yourself publicly. Think about it." Sarah. crumpled the note but kept the flyer. It wasn't a bad idea after all. Not to sell Titan, but to show everyone what was possible when you replaced fear with patience, force with understanding. An idea began to take shape in her mind, risky, bold but potentially transformative. Chris's stay at the ranch extended for more days than Sarah would have liked. Each morning brought a new suggestion about how to modernize the property. Each afternoon a new criticism about the way she managed things. But what really bothered her were the looks he cast at Titan, a mixture of calculation and contempt that made her stomach turn. "That animal is worth a small fortune, you know," he commented during breakfast, 10 days after his arrival. "I spoke with a breeder from Seattle who was interested. Pure genetics, apparently." Sarah lowered her cup. "Slowly. Titan is not for sale. Don't be stubborn, Sarah. Think rationally. You spent, what, 5,000? I can get triple that." "He is not for sale, Chris," she repeated with a firmer voice. End of discussion. Her brother adjusted his expensive glasses with a theatrical, "All right, just thought you might want the money to register for that exposition you keep talking about. I heard the fee is considerable." The mention of the National Exposition made Sarah hesitate. Indeed, the registration fee was high, prohibitive for her tight budget. She had even started selling homemade cheeses and sweets at the local fair to try to raise the amount, but was still far from her goal. "I can handle it on my own," she finally replied. "As you wish. Just remember we're family despite everything." While Chris went out for another of his business meetings in town, Sarah headed to Titan's corral. In recent weeks, they had made remarkable progress. The buffalo now accepted her approach without resistance and, in rare moments, even seemed to appreciate the contact. She had even managed to place a light rope around his neck, the first step toward real training. "We have a lot of work ahead, big guy," she said, caressing the animal's flank, "but we'll show them what we're capable of." That's when she noticed something strange, an area where the hair didn't grow uniformly, forming an irregular pattern near the right flank. Carefully, she examined the spot more closely. It wasn't a natural mark or common scar. "What did they do to you?" she murmured, feeling anger growing in her chest. "Branding iron," said a voice behind her. It was Hank, who had approached silently. But not for identification, that there was punishment. Punishment? The old ranch hand came closer and examined the mark with experienced eyes. "I know this method. Some handlers believe that disciplining with a hot iron teaches the animal to obey. Barbarity from the old days that some still practice." Sarah felt her eyes burn with contained tears. How could anyone do this? "Fear, girl. When you don't understand something, you try to control it through fear." Hank made a significant pause. "Like some people try to do with other people, too." The conversation was interrupted by a pickup truck parking near the main house. From it descended a corpulent man of prosperous appearance, wearing designer clothes and impeccable alligator leather boots. At his side, to Sarah's surprise, was Chris. "Who's that?" she asked Hank. "Travis Blackwell, owner of Horizon Valley Ranch. He's buying all the land in the region to plant GMO soybeans." Sarah observed the two men talking animatedly as they walked toward the house. Chris was making broad gestures, as if presenting the property. "I'll see what he wants," she said, quickly heading to intercept them. "Our little sis," exclaimed Chris with exaggerated enthusiasm upon seeing her. "I was just talking about you. This is Mr. Blackwell, a major businessman who's interested in our lands." "Pleasure, miss," said the man, extending his fleshy hand. "Your brother has been telling me a lot about the potential of this property." "This ranch is not for sale," Sarah replied dryly, ignoring the extended hand. "And my brother has no authority to negotiate it." Travis's smile faltered for an instant, but soon recovered. "I understand your emotional connection to the place, but business is business. I'm prepared to make a generous offer, well above market value." "I'm not interested," Chris intervened, visibly embarrassed. "Sarah, we can at least hear the proposal. It doesn't cost anything." "No, Chris. I already said I won't sell an inch of this land." The businessman looked from one sibling to the other, assessing the situation. "Perhaps I should come back another time when we can talk more calmly," he suggested, adjusting his expensive hat. I have all the documentation ready for a formal offer. That won't be necessary, insisted Sarah. This land is priceless. When the businessman walked away, Chris grabbed his sister's arm forcefully. What the hell do you think you're doing? This might be our only chance to get out of this mediocre life. Mediocre for you, who never understood the value of what we have here. The value? Look around, Sarah, he gestured broadly. A house falling apart, obsolete equipment, and an amateur buffalo breeder who can barely pay the bills. The silence that followed was charged with tension. Finally, Sarah spoke in a low and controlled voice. Grandpa always said you had the eyes of a rich man, but the heart of a beggar. Now I understand what he meant. Chris laughed bitterly. Our grandfather was a foolish dreamer, and you're following the same path. When will you understand that the world doesn't run on good feelings and connection with nature? It's money that moves everything. Then go back to your world of money and leave me in peace in mine. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Her brother's words echoed in her mind, mixing with the discovery of Titan's scar. There was a connection there, a bigger story that was beginning to reveal itself. In the early hours, she heard the sound of a car engine starting. She quickly got up and from the window saw Chris leaving in a hurry. Something about the way he looked back, checking if he was being observed, triggered an alarm in her mind. The next day, while checking the fence wires, Sarah found an envelope dropped near the main gate. Inside, documents from Horizon Valley Ranch, a formal purchase proposal with Chris's signature already, in the seller's place. He can't do this, she murmured to herself. The ranch is ours in equal parts. Leafing through more, she found something that made her blood freeze, a copy of her father's will with alterations she had never seen before. According to that document, Chris would have preferential right to sell the property after 5 years of his father's death, a period that would coincidentally end next month. This isn't right, she told Hank when she found him later. Dad would never favor Chris like this. The old ranch hand examined the papers carefully. Something's fishy here. Your father was fair in his own way, and the date of this addendum, that was when he was already very sick, almost unconscious. A day. Painful suspicion began to form in Sarah's mind. Do you think Chris might have— Don't make accusations without proof, girl, interrupted Hank. But talk to the family lawyer. Mr. Wilson knows all the details of the original documents. That same afternoon, Sarah went to town. Richard Wilson's office was in an old colonial house on the central square, between a pharmacy and a ranch supply store. The lawyer, a gentleman of more than 70 who had been handling the Mitchells' affairs since her grandfather's time, received her with the usual familiarity. My dear, what a pleasant surprise. What brings August's granddaughter to my humble office? Without beating around the bush, Sarah showed him the documents she had found. The lawyer's countenance transformed as he examined each page. This is a fraud, he finally declared, removing his glasses. Your father's original will, which I keep in the safe, does not contain this clause. And this signature. He brought the paper close to his eyes. Well done, but it's not Anthony's. I know that rubric like the palm of my hand. A mixture of relief and indignation invaded Sarah. Chris is trying to sell the ranch using fake documents. It seems so, my young friend, and by the date of this proposal he intended to conclude the deal in the next few days. Upon leaving the office, with authenticated copies of the true will in her bag, Sarah felt strangely light. Her brother's betrayal hurt, but the truth, however bitter, was preferable to manipulation in the shadows. Driving back to the ranch, she decided to pass by the improvised corral where she kept Titan. She needed the silent comfort that the animal's presence now provided her. Upon arriving, however, she found the gate open and the corral empty. Sarah's heart raced when she found the empty corral. Her eyes frantically scanned the area, looking for any sign of Titan or how he might have gotten out. The fence showed. No damage, just the open gate. Someone had deliberately freed him. Titan, she shouted, her voice echoing among the trees surrounding the property. No response beyond the distant song of birds and the wind rustling the leaves. She ran into the house, where she found Aunt Martha preparing dinner. Titan's gone. The corral is empty and the gate open. Her aunt stopped what she was doing, drying, her hands on her apron. "Maybe it's for the best, dear. That animal never belonged here." "Someone opened the gate on purpose," insisted Sarah. "This was no accident." At that moment the phone rang. Aunt Martha answered, and after a few words in a low voice, extended the receiver to her niece. "It's Chris." With trembling hands, Sarah held the phone. "What have you done?" A light laugh sounded from the other end of the line. "Always so dramatic, little sis. If you're talking about that problematic buffalo, I just solved a problem you refused to see." "Where is he? What did you do with him?" "Let's say I found an interested buyer, someone who knows the real value of an animal of that size, even with its behavioral problems. You had no right. Actually, I did. Or did you forget that I'm co-owner of everything on that ranch, including the animals?" Sarah felt her blood boil with anger. "I know about the fake documents, Chris. I was with Mr. Wilson today." A brief silence on the other end suggested this. Information had caught him by surprise. "I don't know what you're talking about," he finally replied, but his voice had lost its previous confidence. "You forged an addendum to Dad's will. You tried to deceive me to sell the ranch. That's a very serious accusation, Sarah. Do you have proof?" "I have enough, and I'm going to recover Titan, whatever it takes." "Good luck with that," he replied with disdain. "Until further notice. That animal is on its way to a new property far from here." The call ended abruptly. Sarah stood holding the silent phone, while a mixture of anger and determination grew inside her. Aunt Martha watched her with a worried expression. "What has he done this time?" "He sold Titan, and he was trying to sell the ranch behind our backs." Her aunt sighed deeply and sat at the kitchen table, suddenly looking older and more tired. "I always knew Chris was ambitious, but I never thought he would go this far." Sarah grabbed the keys to the old pickup that had belonged to her father. "I'm going to look for Titan." "Where? At this hour? Where will you start?" "I don't know, but I can't just sit still." Chris mentioned a buyer, someone who already knew Titan's value. At that moment, an idea came to her mind. Travis Blackwell, the rancher who was here today. Aunt Martha shook her head. "Girl, there's no use going out like this without a clear direction. Wait until tomorrow with a cool head." But Sarah was already at the door. "Every minute counts, Aunt Martha. If Titan is scared or feeling betrayed, he might revert to being the animal everyone feared." Sarah's first stop was at Hank's house. The old ranch hand listened to the story in silence, just nodding occasionally. "I know where Blackwell's ranch is," he finally said, "but it's a huge property with private security. It won't be easy to get in there." "I don't need to get in. I just want to confirm if Titan is there." Hank scratched his grey beard, thoughtful. "I have an acquaintance who works for him. I can ask some discreet questions." While Hank made some calls, Sarah felt consumed by anxiety. She had built a relationship of trust with Titan over weeks, patiently day by day, and now in a single blow, Chris threatened to destroy all of that, and not just her connection with the animal, but also the family legacy she valued so much. "I got something," announced Hank, hanging up the phone. "Blackwell received a shipment tonight. A large animal transported with quite a bit of secrecy. It's in an isolated area of the ranch." "It has to be Titan," concluded Sarah, standing up. "Easy, girl. We can't simply show up there demanding the animal back. Blackwell is a powerful man in the region with many connections. What do you suggest then?" "We need proof that the animal is yours and was illegally traded. Do you have Titan's purchase documents?" "I do, at the ranch, and they're only in my name." "Good. That's a start. But we also need a plan to recover him in case we confirm he's really there." During the following hours, Sarah and Hank developed a strategy. The Horizon Valley Ranch was almost 2 hours away, near the border with another county. It was a modern property, quite different from the traditional Mitchell Ranch: acres, and acres of plantations in straight lines, automated irrigation systems, sheds with cutting-edge technology. They departed at dawn, Sarah driving her pickup and Hank in his old Jeep. The plan was simple. The ranch hand would use his contact to enter the property under some pretext, while Sarah would wait at a strategic point on the ranch's border, from where she could observe the area where supposedly Titan would be. The road that cut through the region was not busy, and each minute seemed to drag on. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about how Titan must be feeling, scared, betrayed, perhaps even returning to the aggressive behaviors that had stigmatized him. "Stay focused," she told herself. "He'll feel your energy when you meet again." After almost 2 hours of travel, they reached the agreed point. From a small hill near the ranch, Sarah could see part of the property with the aid of binoculars. Hank continued ahead toward the main entrance. The sun was already high when Sarah finally spotted something that made her heart leap. A huge black buffalo, being led to an isolated pen by 2 handlers who were using long rods to keep him at a distance. "Titan," she murmured, immediately recognizing the size and posture of the animal. Even from a distance, she could tell something was wrong. Titan was moving in an agitated manner, refusing to enter the new enclosure. One of the handlers was gesturing nervously, while the other approached with what appeared to be some kind of electric prod. Without thinking twice, Sarah ran down the slope, forgetting any plan of discretion. She couldn't allow them to hurt Titan again, to reinforce his traumas. "Stop!" she shouted, approaching the pen. "Don't touch him!" The handlers turned, surprised by her sudden appearance. "Who are you?" "This is private property," said the older one, a man with a hard expression and scars on his face. "That buffalo belongs to me. It was stolen from my ranch." The man let out a dry laugh. "Listen, miss, I don't know who you are or what you want, but this animal was legitimately purchased by Mr. Blackwell." "Illegitimate transaction," she retorted, trying to keep her voice steady. "I have documents that prove ownership." At that moment, Titan, who seemed more agitated since Sarah's arrival, snorted strongly and advanced a few steps in her direction. The younger handler nervously raised the electric prod. "Careful! He's about to attack!" "No!" Sarah raised her hand in a command gesture. "He won't attack anyone!" With slow and measured steps, she approached the fence that separated them. "Titan," she called softly. "It's me, big guy. Everything's okay." To the handler's astonishment, the immense buffalo stopped its agitated movement. His nostrils flared, catching the familiar scent, and his eyes fixed on Sarah's figure. "That's it, good boy. I'm here to take you home." The moment of reconnection was interrupted by the arrival of a luxury pickup from which descended Travis Blackwell, accompanied by 2 men of intimidating appearance. Travis Blackwell adjusted his expensive felt hat as he approached the scene. His calculating gaze alternated between Sarah and the buffalo, as if evaluating a complicated equation. "Ms. Mitchell," he greeted with false cordiality. "What a surprise to find you on my property. I don't recall sending an invitation." "I came to get what's mine," replied Sarah, remaining firm despite the internal tremor she felt. "This buffalo belongs to me." Travis let out a controlled laugh, perfectly rehearsed. "You're mistaken. I bought this animal last night with proper documentation. Deal closed, as we say around here. My brother had no authority to sell Titan. The original purchase documents are only in my name." A flash of irritation passed through the rancher's eyes, quickly replaced by a calculated expression of understanding. "I see. It seems we have a family misunderstanding here." He gestured for his security guards to move back a bit. "Why don't we talk civilly? I'm sure we can reach an agreement." At that moment, Hank appeared, accompanied by the ranch employee who was his contact. The old ranch hand quickly assessed the situation before positioning himself beside Sarah. "Everything okay, girl?" "For now," she replied without taking her eyes off Travis. The rancher seemed slightly uncomfortable with Hank's arrival, but maintained his composure. "Let's be practical," he proposed. "I paid a considerable amount for the animal. If there really was some oversight in the transaction, I'm willing to negotiate." "How much do you want for him?" "He's not for sale," Sarah categorically replied. "He never was." Travis sighed like an adult dealing with a stubborn child. "Everyone has their price, Ms. Mitchell. I just need to discover yours." "You don't understand." Sarah looked at Titan, who remained strangely calm despite the tension around him. "He's not just an animal. We've built a connection that goes beyond money." The businessman let out a more genuine laugh this time. "Connection? With a buffalo? He turned to the handlers. "Did you hear that, boys? The lady has a special connection with the beast." The men laughed nervously, more out of obligation than because they found it funny. They had witnessed, moments before, how the animal responded to Sarah's presence. "Mr. Blackwell," intervened Hank with the formal respect of someone who knows the hierarchies of the field, but without subservience. "The young lady is right about the documents. I know this story from the beginning. The animal was purchased by her at the Cedar Springs Fair with her own resources. And how can I be sure of that? I have a contract signed by Mr. Chris Mitchell." "Fraudulent contract," retorted Sarah. "Just like the documents he tried to use to sell our ranch to you." The mention of falsified documents made Travis adjust his posture. His gaze became harder. "You're making very serious accusations, young lady. And I have proof. I was with Mr. Wilson yesterday. He confirmed the fraud in the supposed addendum to my father's will." A tense silence settled in. Travis seemed to be recalculating his options, while the security guards exchanged uncertain glances. "That's a matter between you and your brother," the businessman finally said. "My business was conducted in good faith." "With fraudulent documents," insisted Sarah. "Do you really want to get involved with illegally acquired property? I imagine your reputation in the region is important." The mention of reputation hit Travis like a well-aimed arrow. He was known for his aggressive expansion methods, but always maintained an impeccable facade of legality. "I propose the following," he said after a few moments of reflection. "Take the animal today, conditionally. I have a meeting with your brother tomorrow at my office in town. We can clarify this situation with all parties present. If you prove what you say, I'll consider nullifying the deal." Sarah hesitated. She didn't trust Travis, much less Chris. It could be a trap. "And if I don't show up?" "Then I'll consider your visit today as trespassing and take appropriate legal measures." Travis's smile was predatory. "Additionally, I'll call the police for the theft of an animal that, until proven otherwise, legally belongs to me." Hank touched Sarah's shoulder discreetly as a signal to accept the proposal. It was a strategic retreat, not a surrender. "Tomorrow at 10, she finally agreed. "But Titan comes with me now." "Very sensible," approved Travis. "Peterson, arrange for the animal's transport." The older handler seemed relieved with the diplomatic solution. Approaching Sarah, he murmured, "Good luck loading that beast. We needed 3 men just to move him here." To everyone's surprise, when Sarah opened the gate and entered the pen, Titan approached her as tame as a domestic animal. She just lightly touched his neck, whispering words that no one else could hear. The immense buffalo followed her docilely when they left the enclosure. "Incredible," commented the younger handler. "Perhaps the lady really is a buffalo whisperer," responded Travis with an ironic tone, but his eyes revealed genuine curiosity. The transport of Titan back to the Mitchell Ranch occurred without incident. Hank arranged a suitable truck with an acquaintance, and the buffalo boarded without resistance as if he understood he was going home. During the journey, Sarah sat in the truck's cab, next to the driver. Her relief at having recovered Titan mixed with apprehension about the next day's meeting. "Do you really think Travis will give up the deal?" she asked Hank, who was following in the Jeep right behind. "I doubt it very much," replied the old ranch hand when they stopped for a quick coffee by the roadside. "Men like him don't easily give up what they want, but they also don't risk their reputation for small things." "And what do I do about Chris? I can't believe my own brother." Hank sighed, his wrinkled face showing the wisdom accumulated over decades of life in the countryside. "Family is complicated, girl. Sometimes those who should be closest end up being the ones who hurt us most. Your brother chose a different path from yours. Maybe it's time to accept that." When they finally arrived at the ranch, it was almost night. Aunt Martha was anxiously waiting on the porch, and her face lit up when she saw the truck followed by the Jeep. "Thank God, I was worried." Sarah got out of the vehicle physically and emotionally exhausted. While Titan was unloaded and led back to his corral, she explained to her aunt everything that had happened. "I always suspected Chris's intentions," commented Aunt Martha sadly, "but falsifying documents, That's a serious crime. Tomorrow, we'll know the extent of all this, replied Sarah, observing Titan, who already in his familiar corral seemed to finally relax. For now, I just want to make sure no one is going to separate us again. She spent the night in the barn, in an improvised hammock near Titan's corral. She didn't want to risk something happening again. In the early hours of the morning, she was awakened by soft sounds, the buffalo moving restlessly as if having nightmares. "It's all right, big guy," she murmured, carefully approaching the fence. "We're home now." The animal calmed at the sound of her voice, like a child being consoled after a fright. Sarah smiled in the darkness. Who would have thought that this buffalo, feared by everyone, would develop such a deep connection with her? The next morning, the sun had barely risen when Hank arrived at the ranch. With him came Mr. Wilson, the ID's family lawyer, who had insisted on accompanying them to the meeting with Travis and Chris. "This situation is getting more serious than we imagined," explained the lawyer as they had coffee in the ranch kitchen. "Document forgery, fraudulent property sale attempt. Your brother may face serious legal problems." "I don't want to harm Chris," admitted Sarah. "I just want him to stop interfering in my life and this ranch." "I understand your feeling," replied Mr. Wilson, adjusting his old glasses. But some lines were crossed here, important legal boundaries. Before they left for town, Sarah went to check on Titan one last time. The buffalo seemed calm, as if he felt he was finally safe. "I'll be back soon," she promised, caressing his muzzle. "And then we'll start our real training." In Travis's office, a modern building in the commercial center of Cedar Springs, Chris was already waiting for them. His countenance was a mixture of irritation and discomfort when he saw his sister enter accompanied by the family lawyer. "I didn't know we were turning this into a court," he commented with disdain. "And I didn't know my own brother would be capable of forging documents to rob me," retorted Sarah. Travis, seated behind an imposing desk of fine wood, observed the scene with the interest of someone watching a private show. "Let's maintain civility, please," he intervened, indicating the chairs in front of his desk. "We're here to resolve a business misunderstanding, nothing more." Mr. Wilson took the lead, placing on the table the original documents of Titan's purchase, exclusively in Sarah's name, as well as authenticated copies of Anthony Mitchell's true will. "As you can see, gentlemen, there is no authorization for the sale of the buffalo by Mr. Chris. As for the ranch, the true will clearly establishes that the property belongs in equal parts to the two siblings, without a preferential clause or exclusive right of sale." Chris kept his eyes fixed on a distant point on the wall, avoiding direct confrontation. Travis examined the documents carefully. "I see," he finally said. "It seems I was led into error." "You were deceived," corrected Mr. Wilson firmly. "And now you have two options. Voluntarily nullify the buffalo purchase contract or face a lawsuit for receiving fraudulently acquired property." Travis Blackwell hadn't built an agricultural empire by being foolish. He recognized when a battle was lost. "Considering the circumstances, I will nullify the contract," he agreed, showing no emotion. "As for the amount already paid to Mr. Chris—" "That's a matter between you two," interrupted the lawyer. "My clients have no responsibility for values negotiated in a fraudulent transaction." Chris finally looked at his sister, his eyes revealing not remorse, but contained fury. "Satisfied. Now? You've managed to ruin everything, as always." "Me? You tried to rob me, Chris. You sold Titan behind my back and almost sold our ranch, too." "That ranch is dead weight, an unproductive piece of land that you insist on keeping out of idiotic sentimentalism." Chris's mask of composure finally fell. "We could have had millions, Sarah. Each would go our own way, free from that place." "I don't want to be free from that place. It's our home, our history." "Your history, maybe. It was never mine." Chris rose abruptly. "Keep your decaying ranch and your crazy buffalo. I give up." When he headed for the door, Sarah felt a confused mixture of emotions, anger, sadness, but also relief. Maybe it was better this way. "Chris," she called, making him stop for an instant, "if someday you change your mind about the ranch, it will always be your home, too." Without answering, without looking back, he left, leaving a heavy silence. In the room, The days that followed brought relative calm to the Mitchell Ranch. With the question of Titan's ownership resolved and the threat of selling the land averted, Sarah could finally focus on what really mattered: preparation for the National Exposition of Cedar Springs, which would happen in less than 2 months. The idea, which had initially emerged as a provocation from Chris, now took shape as a real goal. It wouldn't be easy. The competition gathered the best breeders in the region, with animals trained for years for impeccable presentations. And there she was, with a buffalo rejected by everyone, trying to prove that alternative methods of animal treatment could work. "Are you sure about this, girl?" asked Hank one afternoon, as he watched Sarah leading Titan through the pasture, in an exercise of familiarization with light ropes. "That exposition is serious business. The judges are traditionalists. They won't easily understand what you're trying to prove." "That's exactly why we need to participate," she replied, adjusting the rope on the buffalo's muscular neck, "to show that there's another path besides domination through fear." The old ranch hand scratched his gray beard, thoughtful. "You'll need help. You can't do this alone." "I have you, don't I?" smiled Sarah. "This old body doesn't handle the strain like before," laughed Hank. "But I know someone who could help. A young man who worked with me a few years ago. He has ideas similar to yours about how to treat animals." So the following week, Michael arrived at the ranch. He was a man in his early 20s, with sunburned brown skin and lively eyes that seemed to absorb everything around him. Graduated in veterinary medicine from the State University, he had abandoned a promising career in luxury clinics to dedicate himself to developing humanized animal handling techniques. "Hank told me about you and your buffalo," he said, after the initial greetings. I confess I was intrigued. "I hope in a good way," smiled Sarah, leading him to the corral where Titan was resting in the shade. Upon seeing the immense animal, Michael let out a whistle of admiration. "He's magnificent. Perfect bone structure, developed musculature. And those horns. How could anyone consider this animal a problem?" "Because he doesn't accept being dominated," explained Sarah. "Traditional methods didn't work with him. Actually," she hesitated for a moment, "we think he was mistreated. He has branding iron marks on his flank." Michael cautiously approached the corral and observed Titan with professional eyes. The buffalo, in turn, stared at the stranger with distrustful curiosity. "May I examine him more closely?" "Of course, but let's take it slow. He still gets nervous with strangers." During the following week, Michael became a constant presence at the ranch. He helped with the daily training sessions with Titan, suggesting specific exercises to strengthen the animal's confidence and improve his responsiveness to subtle commands. At night, he and Sarah spent hours on the porch talking about animal behavior theories, exchanging ranch stories, and, inevitably, getting to know each other better. How did a beginning buffalo breeder gather the courage to challenge a powerful businessman like Travis Blackwell? He asked one night, while they shared a thermos of coffee. Sarah smiled, contemplating the stars that dotted the dark sky. It wasn't courage. It was desperation mixed with stubbornness. "And a huge heart," added Michael, looking at her with an admiration that went beyond the professional. A blush rose to Sarah's cheeks, but was concealed by the darkness of the night. "My grandfather. I used to say that every problem has a solution when you refuse to give up. Your grandfather seemed to be a wise man. He was. I wish he could see me now trying to finish what he started." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a vehicle approaching. The headlights cut through the darkness of the dirt road, briefly illuminating the porch where they were sitting. "Expecting someone?" asked Michael, intrigued. "No," replied Sarah, standing up. "It's late for visitors." To her surprise, she recognized Hank's Jeep, but it wasn't the old ranch hand who was driving. His youngest son, Matt, parked abruptly and jumped from the vehicle with a grave expression. "Sarah, my father asked me to come immediately. He's in the hospital." "Hospital? What happened?" "Heart problems. He's stabilized but asked to see you, said it's important." Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed her purse and jacket. "Michael, can you keep an eye on Titan? I shouldn't be long." "Of course, go ahead." At the small regional hospital in Cedar Springs, she found Hank in a simple room connected to cardiac monitors. His face, normally tanned, looked pale and tired, but his eyes maintained their characteristic brightness. "Sorry for the scare, girl," he said when Sarah entered. "These doctors exaggerate. It was just a palpitation." "Mild heart attack," corrected the nurse who was adjusting the IV. "And it could have been much worse if you hadn't sought help quickly." When they were alone, Hank held Sarah's hand with surprising strength. "Listen, I needed to talk to you. I received a visit today, before this setback." "A visit? From whom?" "Chris. Her." Brother's name caused an instant reaction in Sarah, a mixture of apprehension and sadness. Since the confrontation in Travis's office 3 weeks ago, she had heard nothing from him. What did he want? "Information about the exposition. He wanted to know if you're really going to participate, in which category, those things." "Why?" Hank hesitated, as if measuring the impact of his next words. "He's working for Travis now as a business consultant or something like that." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her own brother, now allied with her greatest antagonist? "Are you sure?" "Unfortunately, yes, and there's more. I heard rumors that Travis is going to enter his animals in the exposition this year, including in the handling category, the same one you plan to compete in with Titan." "That doesn't make sense. Travis has never been interested in handling competitions. He breeds for slaughter and reproduction, not for expositions." "Exactly. Strange, isn't it? Almost as if it were personal." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. The idea of facing Travis again, now in a public environment, with Chris at his side, was disturbing. "Do you think they're planning something?" "I don't know, girl, but I wanted to warn you. Keep your eyes open." When she returned to the ranch, it was already past midnight. She found Michael asleep in a chair on the porch, a veterinary book open on his lap. She didn't want to wake him. Instead, she silently headed to Titan's corral. The buffalo, contrary to what she expected, wasn't sleeping. He was standing alert, as if he too felt the tension in the air. "Looks like we'll have more challenges ahead, big guy," she murmured, caressing the animal's muzzle. "But we'll face them together, as always." The next morning, during breakfast, she reported to Michael what she had discovered. "This changes our plans," concluded the young veterinarian, after listening attentively. "We need to intensify the training. If Travis is going to participate in the same category, he'll certainly bring his best animals and handlers." "It's no longer just about participating," agreed Sarah. "Now we need to win." The following weeks transformed the ranch into an intensive training center. Michael introduced innovative techniques that combined scientific principles with the emotional connection that Sarah had already established with Titan. They worked from dawn to dusk, with small breaks only for quick meals and necessary rest. Titan responded surprisingly well. Each day brought new progress. First, he accepted Michael's complete touch. Then he learned to respond to commands at a distance. Finally, he began to execute complex maneuvers that not even the most optimistic would expect from a buffalo considered problematic months earlier. The day of the National Exposition of Cedar Springs dawned with a clear sky and a brilliant sun that promised heat. Sarah woke even before the first ray of light touched the windows of the house. She felt her stomach churning from a mixture of anxiety and excitement. Today would be the day when everything would be decided, not just the competition, but the validation of everything she believed about the relationship between humans and animals. "Ready for the big day?" asked Michael, who had arrived while it was still dark to help with the final preparations. "As ready as I could be," she replied, trying to sound more confident than she really felt. Aunt Martha served a hearty breakfast, insisting that both eat well before the long day ahead. The aunt, initially skeptical about the whole buffalo adventure, as she used to call it, now showed a discreet pride in her niece. "Regardless of the result," she said while serving another slice of cornbread, "you've already proven your point. You transformed that animal." "I didn't transform him, Aunt Martha. I just gave him the chance to show who he really is." Titans. Transport to the exposition was organized with extreme care. Michael had borrowed a suitable truck, with gentle ramps and comfortable space. To no one's surprise, the buffalo boarded without resistance, as if understanding the importance of the moment. When they arrived at the exposition grounds, they were greeted by a scene of intense movement. Handlers were leading imposing animals, vendors organizing colorful stands, judges in suits circulating with clipboards in hand. The air vibrated with a contagious energy of expectation and competition. The first familiar person they spotted was Hank, recovered from his cardiac scare but still with a fragile appearance. He was wearing his best cowboy outfit, impeccably ironed checkered shirt, unmarked felt hat, gleaming boots. "I came to see history being made," he announced with a broad smile upon meeting them. While unloading Titan and installing him in the designated space, Sarah felt curious glances and whispered comments around her. The story of the problem buffalo and the stubborn girl who tamed it had spread, creating an aura of expectation around her participation. "Look, it's her," she heard someone say. "The one who bought the buffalo nobody wanted." "They say the animal was violent," commented another. "I want to see if it's true that she transformed him without using traditional methods." Michael noticed Sarah's discomfort with the attention received and discreetly approached. "Ignore them. They're just curious. Soon they'll have much more to talk about." It wasn't long before they spotted the imposing structure mounted by Horizon Valley Ranch. Unlike the simple stands of most participants, Travis Blackwell had invested in an elaborate construction with giant banners, a VIP area, and even uniformed waiters serving coffee to illustrious visitors. And there he was, surrounded by a group of admirers, proudly pointing to his award-winning animals. At his side, to Sarah's displeasure, Chris was animatedly conversing with one of the competition judges. "Unbelievable," she murmured, feeling her stomach sink. "Chris knows that judge. They're clearly trying to influence the decisions." "Easy," advised Michael, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "The judges are professionals. In the end, what matters is the performance in the arena." The program indicated that the handling and obedience category would be one of the last of the day. This gave Sarah and Michael time to observe the other competitions and mainly evaluate the competitors. Horizon Valley Ranch had entered a young buffalo with lustrous brown fur, led by an experienced handler who used a whip as an extension to have his arm, not to hit the animal but to command it with almost military precision. "Impressive," commented Michael as they watched a quick training session. "That buffalo responds like a well-calibrated machine." "But look at his eyes," pointed Sarah. "There's no real connection there, just conditioning and fear." As the time for her presentation approached, Sarah felt the anxiety increase. Titan, on the other hand, remained surprisingly calm, eating fresh hay and occasionally looking around with tranquil curiosity. "How can he be so relaxed?" asked Aunt Martha, who had arrived to watch the competition. "Because he trusts Sarah," replied Hank with simplicity. "And an animal that trusts doesn't fear." Minutes before the presentation, while Sarah was mentally preparing, Chris unexpectedly appeared near her stand. He was elegantly dressed, in a light suit that seemed out of place in the rural environment. "I came to wish you good luck," he said with a formality that sounded false. "Since when do you care?" replied Sarah coldly. "We're siblings despite everything. And, well, I wanted you to know that I have nothing to do with Travis's methods. I'm just advising on business." There was something in his eyes, a glimmer of sincerity that made Sarah hesitate in her hostility. "What do you mean by methods?" Chris looked around nervously before answering in a low voice. "He's obsessed with beating you. It's not just a competition for him, it's personal. Something about teaching a lesson to those who challenge his authority." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because despite our differences, you're my sister, and because," he hesitated, "Dad would be on your side in this story. He always was, actually." Before Sarah could fully process what those words meant, the sound system announced the beginning of the handling and obedience category. Chris quickly walked away, as if afraid of being seen talking to her. The competition consisted of a series of commands and movements that animal and handler should execute with precision. Each participant had 5 minutes to demonstrate the level of harmony and obedience achieved. The judges evaluated not only the technical execution, but also the apparent ease and naturalcy of the movements. The buffalo from Horizon Valley Ranch was the second to last to perform. Its performance was impeccable. Precise movements, instant obedience, perfect execution of each command. The audience applauded enthusiastically, and Travis smiled with the confidence of someone who already considers himself the winner. When it finally came time for Sarah and Titan, an expectant silence took over the arena. Many there had heard the story of the problem buffalo and were curious to see if the rumors about its transformation were true. Titan entered the arena with firm but calm steps. There were no ropes pulling him, whips guiding him, just Sarah walking serenely at his side. "Here we go, big guy," she whispered. "Just be yourself." The presentation began simply. Basic commands to stop, advance, turn. Titan responded with a fluidity that surprised even the most skeptical judges. It wasn't the mechanical obedience seen in other animals, but a coordinated dance between two beings communicating at a deeper level. As the presentation progressed, Sarah introduced more complex elements. At one point, she completely moved away from Titan and, with just subtle hand gestures, guided him in a figure-8 path around markers. The audience, initially silent, began to murmur in admiration. When Titan executed a particularly difficult maneuver, remaining completely still while Sarah walked in circles around him, the first spontaneous applause arose. For the grand finale, Sarah had planned something that not even Michael knew. She approached Titan and with a gentle gesture asked him to lie down. The immense buffalo, which months before was considered untamable, slowly knelt and then lay down completely, exposing his neck in a universal gesture of absolute trust. Sarah knelt beside him and for a few seconds just stayed there, her hand resting lightly on the animal's head. It was more than a demonstration of obedience. It was living proof of emotional connection, of mutual respect. When she stood up, the arena exploded in applause. People who had never questioned traditional animal handling methods discreetly wiped away tears. Even some veteran competitors watched with admiration what they had just witnessed. Travis Blackwell, however, was not applauding. His expression oscillated between disbelief and contained fury. At his side, surprisingly, Chris was applauding with genuine enthusiasm, a proud smile on his face. The judges' deliberation took longer than usual. When they finally returned, the public was already anticipating the result. The announcement of the third and second places was received with polite applause. When the time came for the grand champion, the head judge made a point of adding a comment to his declaration. First place unanimously goes to Sarah Mitchell and Titan, not only for the impeccable technical execution, but mainly for demonstrating a new path in the relationship between humans and animals, a path based on trust and mutual respect. Between hugs from Michael, Hank, and Aunt Martha, Sarah could barely contain her tears. It wasn't just a personal victory or a validation of her methods. It was the complete redemption of Titan, the animal that no one believed could change. While the crowd dispersed and the organizers prepared for the award ceremony, Travis unexpectedly approached. "Sarah, congratulations," he said with rigid formality. It was a deserved victory. There was something in his tone, a reluctant admission of defeat that, coming from a man like him, meant more than 1,000 words of praise. "Thank you," replied Sarah simply. "If you ever consider selling this extraordinary animal—" "He is not for sale," she interrupted, but without hostility. "He never will be." Travis nodded as if he already expected that answer. "I understand. In that case, perhaps we can discuss another possibility. I'm interested in implementing alternative handling methods on my property. Perhaps you could consider a consultancy?" The proposal surprised Sarah. The man who weeks before represented everything she fought against was now offering an opportunity to expand her ideas. "We can talk about that," she agreed after a moment of reflection, "but with one condition. Michael needs to be part of the project." The young veterinarian, who was listening to the conversation a few steps away, blushed slightly, but his eyes shone with the prospect of the professional challenge. The award ceremony was brief, but exciting. Upon receiving the trophy, a bronze sculpture representing the harmony between man and animal, Sarah made a point of bringing Titan to the stage. The buffalo, as if understanding the solemnity of the moment, remained majestically still, at her side. Later, as they prepared to return to the ranch, Chris approached again. He seemed different, less arrogant, more reflective. "Impressive what you did there," he commented, looking at Titan, who was resting peacefully in the open truck. Maybe I underestimated you, and what the ranch represents." Sarah smiled, feeling a small breach in the wall that had separated them for so long. "The door will always be open," she said simply, "for when you want to come home." Chris didn't respond, but his gaze said a lot. He nodded slightly before walking away toward the parking lot. On the way back, with the setting sun painting the horizon in orange hues, Sarah traveled in silence. Beside Michael, in the rear compartment, Titan was resting peacefully, the champion trophy fixed to the wall near him. "What are you thinking about?" asked Michael, noticing her distant gaze. "About how it all began, at that auction, when everyone was laughing at my decision. And now look at you two, champions, local celebrities, and possibly about to revolutionize animal handling in the region." Sarah smiled, reaching for Michael's hand and intertwining her fingers with his. "All because I believe that, behind the fear and aggression, there was an extraordinary animal waiting for a chance to show who he really was. Just as there was an extraordinary handler waiting for a chance to show the world the power of true connection," he completed, squeezing her hand affectionately. When they arrived at the ranch, the sky was already dotted with stars. Titan was led to his corral, which welcomed him with the familiarity of someone finding their true home. Sarah remained for a few moments observing him, feeling a deep peace in realizing how both had come a long way since that first encounter. The journey was far from over. There were new challenges ahead, new minds to be opened, new hearts to be touched, but now they had something powerful on their side, living proof that with patience, respect, and understanding, even the highest barriers can be overcome. Titan, as if reading her thoughts, raised his majestic head and stared at her. With those deep eyes that, once full of fear and distrust, now reflected serenity and confidence. They were no longer just handler and animal. They were journey companions, each with their own battles won, each with their own form of courage. "Good night, champion," whispered Sarah, caressing the animal's muzzle one last time before retiring. Tomorrow would be a new day with new possibilities.